Welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. I see that smile on your face. Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another amazing guest, David Chametzky, who has a testimony to tell. David, if you could come up and introduce yourself, and then as y'all know, City Sid is going to kick off that first question.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And really, I guess, I don't know if Sid wants to ask a question or I should just start explaining who I am. I'm Uncle Dave. One of my nicknames is Uncle Dave. How that came up was I was working in the recovery space, and we were talking, and we were in a situation where sometimes you're in a meeting, and what happens is people kind of tune you out. And that's why I want to start off with this is I'm not that guy who tunes anybody out. I love to hear stories. I love to be part of this. And what I do is I help people align their message, their divine message, to make sure that they have the right impact and the right message and content places to get that message out there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being here with us this evening. As we do every episode, every guest, we like to start off with the beginning. Tell us a little bit how you grew up, your household structure, if any of what you had been through kind of stemmed from that time, if you experienced any trauma in those years. Give us a little bit of your backstory.
Sure, no problem. Yeah. So I grew up, but my dad was just getting out of the Air Force, so I was actually born on an Air Force base in San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base. For any of those who have served in the Air Force, you might have come through Lackland. And I was 6 weeks old. My dad got discharged and came back to New York, where both my parents had grown up. And it was a relatively normal growing up. But there was always traumas that went on, right? Yelling and things like that. Most of us have gone through those things, and I didn't even know because we don't recognize our normal is what our normal is. We don't always recognize it because of all the things that come up in our lives. And I didn't know, recognizing the anger. I just thought that's everybody was, because everybody in my world, that's how their homes were for the most part. There was yelling. There was anything. And one of the things that I actually noticed years later is my dad would point a lot, do a lot of pointing, and made threatening, and we got some hitting done at times, but the pointing was one of the things that was my triggering. I can get through a lot of the other parts, but the pointing, I didn't know that till I was in my 40s, and I had got into therapy, and I found out about it. And this is why I'm talking about it, is because there's some of the triggers that we have within ourselves. Our people know, because once I mentioned to my friends, hey, I found out in therapy that if you pointed at me, and a lot of my friends were like, yeah, I knew that. I'm like, why didn't you say something? So, I that's why I talk to people about it all the time, is try to recognize as early as you are as a child, if there's something that irritates you, if there's something that bothers you, figure that out for yourself. Because once you can get away from it and heal yourself, life becomes different. And that's how I've spent a lot of my life. Didn't know a lot of the things that bothered me. I just thought it was normal. And now I understand much differently that anything that I pay attention, a little bit more self-aware. And because of that self-awareness, it brings me to a different place to then have that conversation. Hey, this is bothering me. Why? That's why I'm sometimes my best client, in that I recognize when it bothers me, and then I try to figure out why. And if I don't know, then I ask questions to those who I trust.
And I want to ask, as a child, what did the pointing do to you? What triggers did it cause?
Well, it told me a lot of things, right? When the pointing came up, it was, it was forcefully, and it was like, hey, don't you question anything, so it was to kind of keep yourself a little more quiet. And actually during one of the episodes, that was where he broke a door, and it almost went in my eye. I wasn't wearing glasses then, and I never realized it. That was what tied it to the pointing. I didn't ever put anything together until I was able to sit with somebody, a professional, a therapist, and to identify that story. As we talked about the anger, the yelling, and things like that, you don't realize why the triggers happen. You don't realize that it's our coping mechanisms, and it's not only about the experiences, but it's how we cope with it. That's where a lot of us, and I've been guilty of it. My coping mechanisms weren't always the best.
Now, was this something that you kind of kept under wraps? Was it something everybody kind of understood about you? Is it something, people just kind of thought was a fluke? Like, why would somebody be, triggered by that? Like, what was the general consensus about it? Or, how did you either mask or display it, amongst other people?
Well, the challenge with that is we don't know how we're masking it, right? We just think that's the way it is. That's just the way Dave is. That was, with some of my friends when I had some deeper conversations with them around. Um, you don't recognize it because you just think that's who you are. The yelling, that's the guy who gets loud. That's the guy who does this. That's the guy who does that. I didn't realize a lot of those things. And I'm not trying to diffuse it and go, oh, feel bad for Dave. That's why as an adult, I've been trying to work and find all those little triggers of the things that I don't like about myself and I didn't want to. So because I didn't tell people, oh, my dad punched doors and made holes in walls and all these things in my home. It was just, people came over to my house and they saw it, and I didn't even recognize it as something like, oh, that's something wrong. I mean, when I had done that as an adult once, and I went to go talk to one of my friends, and he was like, that's not, one, that's not coping, but he goes, you could have got arrested. And I was like, what? Come on, man. That's how I grew up. And he goes, well, I'm sorry, that's how you grew up, but that's not proper. So not everything that we do and the coping mechanisms that we've learned or we saw, the modeling that we saw, is always great. And that was among the things, the yelling and the short temper. It was a lot of, things that we get frustrated about, and you have to understand why you're frustrated and why, sometimes we talk over each other. We don't listen. Those are all the things that really become other things. I mean, I've worked in substance disease, and a lot of people use different coping mechanisms, right? A lot of times when you use the substances, and food is a substance. So, I still have used food at times to, fill the needs that I need. I want, not only for just regular living, but, I have my sweets, and that led me to a different path. And that's really what we try to do. And that's why I love being on podcasts like this and talking to youth. And because the earlier we stop the trends, the ideas, the conversations, and learning the right techniques and resources, life becomes better. And then we're able to cope better as we get into life. Life will always continue to life, but it's how we get through those things.
And I want to come in and ask, so as a child, did you have a aggression or anger issue? Because you said you would yell and get upset.
Yeah. So you yelling. Yeah. I didn't get to fight. I was actually picked on a lot of times. So a lot of that became part of my nature. I always was quiet. I'd walk into, some situations and I'd be picked on and things like that. And I learned that I had to be quiet. I had to be, I had to kind of suck it up, right? That, I'm old enough where that was one of the healing mechanisms that they taught us. Suck it up. Come on, you're a man. Be a man. Be all these things, but none of these things were necessarily as healthy as they needed to be. There were coping mechanisms, and that's fine. But the real answer is they weren't healthy coping mechanisms, and that's why when I notice patterns now within my own life or with the people I work with, that's where you can identify and figure out what the triggers are and why. You do those deep dives. People talk about deep dives, about going into finding Why do we look for certain things? How do we grow through certain things? That's the magic. And that's the scary part. A lot of people don't want to go through those things. I have a saying all the time that the monsters in our head are worse than the monsters that we thought were under our bed, because we are our worst enemy at times. But I'll also tell you is when you find these things, you could also be your best friend.
And in what, I guess, what are the biggest areas of your life which that affected you in those years? Was it academically, socially? In which ways do you feel you suffered the most? Having to live in lieu of those triggers.
I think it affected all of those things. I didn't want to ask questions. I didn't want to reach out. The things I was good at, I was very good at, and the things like math, I wasn't great at, and didn't have the necessary tools or opportunities to speak up because I was told. I mean, one of my other traumas in life, I have to do a presentation in math class, and I could still picture it right now. Is I had to read, and when I was growing up, we didn't have computers, so it was all handwritten stuff. So as I'm reading it, and I misspelled something. I couldn't say the word statistics. I said statics, and the math teacher, it was in middle school, kept on yelling at me, and I was like, I can't do it. Like I just couldn't do it. And then yelling doesn't necessarily help somebody who's already stressed to speak in public and things like that. And it damaged me. I didn't want to speak in public at all, and now I'm a public speaker and I teach people how to speak in public. So the irony there doesn't get lost, but it's one of those things that I teach and I live through the fact that I got that right. All your friends in your class that you spend a year with, they all are laughing and making fun, and then the teacher made fun of me. Didn't necessarily help you in a time period, a very important time period as a teenager. It was like in sixth or seventh grade. I think it was sixth, and it's a very that time that type of time of year, right? That's that 12, 13, 14 age. I don't think 14. I think it was like, but so it was that really important foundation of where my peers then made fun of me. I was again excluded out. There's lots of things when we're intentionally or unintentionally excluded out or made to be the person, right? Sometimes that's why we even look at it on the other side of that coin is the person who's the class clown. What is getting them? No, I wasn't the class clown. I was that guy. I mean, historically, that was the message that my teachers gave my mom is if Dave ever applied himself, he would be really good at what he does. And I didn't apply myself. I would be distracted because of the things. I was happy when it was quiet, when my parents weren't home. They both worked, and once they got home, there was always those levels of stress that came in, depending on who had a bad day, depending on did I do everything right. It wasn't good to have bad grades, so I would get yelled about that, and that's usually not a great way to improve grades. There's that the old saying of the beatings will continue until morale improves. That's not a great way to learn either.
I want to jump back a little bit into the bullying because I'm really big on sharing resources on bullying because I've been on both sides. Can you talk a little bit about the bullying that you went through as a child and how it affected you?
Yeah, I didn't think about it till I was as an adult. But in second grade, I was picked on. In fact, at that time, Chametzky's not a most common name, but if you remember, there was a TV show, The Monkeys, and it was Davy Jones. I used to sign my papers Davy Jones, just that way they knew who I was and things like that until open school night when the teacher spoke to my mother, and my mother came home upset because and told me, why I should be proud of who I am and all these things, as you're trying to figure out your identity. And some of those people actually that were in the class making fun of me, continued in other aspects of my life, playing ball. Then my parents took me out of ball, and I didn't really have some social interactions. So there's a lot of different things that sometimes when you get in those ruts, it's very hard to get out of, especially as a child, if people aren't hearing you and you're not having the ability to find those resources. The resources I have now. So now when I heal, and I've healed some of my inner child things, that's where the power becomes. But it's so hard to do that and identify that, and that's just because of what I've learned and how I've gotten to here, just because I needed to heal it. Not a lot of people had told me early enough to try to correct my behaviors. So I always got into trouble, been divorced, and all these things that come up. And everybody, when you're in relationships and even just friendships, not everybody shares what they need to share. There's a lot of things, times that I've spoken with friends. I'm like, I know you for 20 years. I didn't know that. And that's where we need to keep having those conversations, because if we see something recognizing in somebody else or ourselves, we need to figure out why. Why do you do that? And why is a really great word, question, because then we can look into the why. Why does it feel like that? And then you start thinking about when it happened, and then I have the magic tools to heal people as well as myself.
So I do kind of want to get into the meat and potatoes of your journey here. As our title says, healing beyond guilt and pain. Tell us a little bit about what it is. What was the big event that you had to heal through? What brought upon the guilt and the pain behind it?
Well, that's been my whole life. When I how I call them Phoenix moments. Those moments that you rise out of. One of my first ones was again in my 20s. I was dating this woman, my first girlfriend, first serious girlfriend, and we would talk. And back in those days, we didn't have unlimited long distance. She was going to college in California, and she got killed by a drunk driver. I was actually the person who told her to go to the party, and she was walking on the sidewalk and she got killed. I didn't know that. Again, people told me, you'll get over it, you'll find somebody new, or it's sad, you'll get over it. And grief holds on to yourself. And a lot of us, hold on to different, you were talking about guilt, survivor guilt. So sometimes in a situation when you're left and I was left in that situation, I didn't realize how much pain I was holding on to for her death. Now I was 3,000 miles away, and I just told her to go to a party. She didn't drive. She didn't, she wasn't drinking. She was walking on a sidewalk when she got hit. And that's the real thing is, so there was really nothing, there was no reason why I should feel guilty, though I did. And there's still times I do feel guilty because I loved her and I thought that we were going to build a life together. So, guilt comes to us and how we figure it out. We don't know why we might feel guilty about certain things. And I've been guilty about a lot of things. I hate the fact that I got divorced from my kid's mom, because I would have loved to have been that, happy, Harriet and Ozzy type of relationship, the Bucks, to have them together. But so you have those things, so the guilt, there's times that I, feel guilty with the kids. While the divorce wasn't my choice, it was something that I needed to get over. There's always something in our lives that just throws us in there. And I believe sometimes I'm a little faith-based in that I believe the universe or God, whatever that means to you, aligns us and pushes us to exactly where we're supposed to be. I had a great career in corporate America, but I knew I was supposed to be doing the work that I'm doing now, helping people heal, helping executives, train executives to live a less stressed life. And it's all because I've gone through those things. I didn't go through those things. That's why sometimes I'm like, why'd I go through this, God? And I can't tell you that you went through something, but I do know that you both have gone through some things also, right? Why'd you go through it? And sometimes it's because other people need to hear these messages. And when I attempted suicide 6 years ago, I was all going through, horrible life situations, but I was told, I heard a voice that said, it's not your time. You got to go back and talk to people about it, and and tell your story. And I've been telling my story for the past 6 years. I had a TEDx talk where I told my story. I talk about my story, and now I help people align their story, or even write stories for people, because it's the message, it's the storytelling that becomes so powerful.
And I want to go back. Are you open to talking about your divorce?
Yeah.
Where do you feel as though what caused the divorce? Do you think you were a part of it? Some of the mental health things that you were going, or was it a combination? Because so many people struggle with nowadays staying together.
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. I definitely play a role in it. I don't want to throw it on. It would be very easy because I was faithful in my marriage, and so it would be very easy for me to say, "Hey, it's all somebody else." Though it's again, the yelling didn't help. We both yelled. She came from a family with a lot of trauma, and she also experienced a lot of trauma. Communication wasn't always easy. It's it was a lot of things, and we were younger, and and then you have kids. So again, there's nobody's fault. I'll take responsibility. In fact, after my suicide attempt, I made sure I spoke to my kids, and I spoke to my ex, their mom, and I said, I forgive you for everything. It was one of those things. This forgiveness is so powerful. Not that you're forgiving them for their behaviors. Why are we carrying around? Why am I carrying around hatred or anger? That it doesn't serve me any good. And that's the real truth. So, all these things are the things. I mean, there's the ACE studies. Anybody who doesn't know about childhood trauma and the ACE studies talk about all the traumas we have. Sometimes it carries with us in life. And one of the healing mechanisms that I always teach and I love to talk about, it actually says the past is always present until you're able to heal the past to make your present more stronger. And those are really important things to say. And it's hard to do at times because we don't recognize it. And it is tough work to go through some of the worst times of our life to become stronger and healthier going forward.
What was another instance in which you felt like you needed to heal from, or that you may have felt guilt about that wasn't directly, correlated to you? I know you said your divorce was kind of one of many things, but what else, had kind of transpired that you had to heal from?
Well, I think like everybody else, I think I've had heartbreaks and disappointments in life. Just recently, 2.5 years ago, or it's almost 3 years at this point, I lost my career after 30 years of being in corporate America. I got a golden handshake at 55. They said your position is being eliminated, and you need to work on from that. And I needed to figure out what I'm doing full time to pay the bills. And it's been a little bit more of a struggle than I would have liked, but those things have also taught me a lot of other things. The ideas of planning things and recognizing that. Again, during those periods, I've had other people in my relationships, lives, and things like that you're doing it. I mean, dealing with during one of the things I had to get over with, which showed me some of my growth, was in 2022. I had 3 major deaths in my life, and getting through those relatively healthy, mental health wise, were really something that got to test me. The first death was my friend, uh, my best friend, for 35 years. He died unexpectedly, and he left me. So I had to deal with that, cope with that, and deal with a loss. But also, he left, and I always promised him that I would take care of his mother who had Alzheimer's, and he's a single child. And what I did is I took care of his mother. That was the second death. Spending some time with her, including the last 3 days of her life. It's tough, and to deal with those things, because I was able to have already healed myself in a way that I can manage it differently. That's why I'll keep saying to everybody, no matter what you've gone through, it's how you heal presently, because that's the important thing. And, later that year, my own mom passed away, and I had visited her a few months before and said my goodbyes. She was deteriorating, and I tried to restart her a little bit, but she had stopped eating at that point. And when she did eventually transition, people were like, "Are you going to go back down to Houston to see her?" And I said, "No, I already had the confidence because I healed everything. I said everything I needed to say when I could." Same thing with my dad. My dad had Alzheimer's when he passed, and him and I obviously didn't have a very good relationship our whole lives. But I know the last words that I said to him, and I meant them, were, "I love you." Kind of forgive. He nodded his head. He also knew, the ironic part. I used to laugh with the nurses is that they were like, he said when his son gets here, everything's gonna be fixed. And I go, I guess he has a different son because he's never said many nice things to me or about me to my face. So, but it's one of those things we have to figure out the best way for us to find peace. I can't tell you, and I'll stress it enough, that the quicker that you could find peace for you, going back to that forgiveness piece, it doesn't, again, forgive anybody for their behaviors, but you can forgive them for not knowing at that time how to do it, or not giving you what you needed at that time. And that's the power, and it's for us we're forgiving. I'm not holding on to the negativity, the hatred in my heart. What does that give me? And that, again, going back to faith, I believe anything that separates us further from the universal truth or God or whatever you want to call it, then that's man-made. And if it's man-made, then that's fallible. Whereas if it's unconditional love, and that's why I make sure that love starts with me.
Is it me? It's on me? Oh, okay. Sorry. I have a question. I want to talk about your suicide attempt again, or going through the mental health issues of the suicide. Can you talk a little bit about what led you to feel suicidal and some of the things that you were going through to get there, and also if you attempted suicide, are you open to talking about how you attempted suicide?
I won't say how I attempted suicide. I don't want anybody to ever copy that idea or be like, "Oh, that's a good idea."
Okay.
It was a very good idea. I still say God stepped in, and that's what happened. That wasn't the voice I heard. But I was just feeling the pressures. At that time, I was actually coaching people, so I knew how to do the resources. I knew how to share the resources. I just didn't do it myself. So I was dealing with, a business that wasn't working as well. Wasn't that happy with my job. I had, family pressures. There's a lot of things going on in my family. And, I went back to some of the anger, right? I would be frustrated. I'd yell a little bit more because I couldn't communicate in the ways that people needed to hear. And so all those things, and I wasn't releasing it. I wasn't healing any of it. And I wasn't recognizing the challenges that I was adding on to other people's lives. And then one of the conversations was like, somebody had said to me, "You're hurting your kids." And anybody who knows me, I don't want to hurt my kids, and I don't want to hurt anybody, truthfully. But so it really goes back to that point on, if I'm hurting everybody, man, I'm out. And that's really why I was very comfortable in my decision. And, I was like, all right, let everybody who's in my life, if I'm hurting them all, because that's what I was being told. That was a negative talk that I was being told. And, Sometimes when we're going through things, all we need is a little negative talk that, I was like, all right, I'm going to research and figure out the best way possible, right? I didn't want to leave a mess. I didn't want this. I didn't want that. Uh, and I thought I had the foolproof plan. I did have a really good plan, and it should have worked. I to this day, I still don't know why it didn't, but it's okay. I'm not upset, and I won't do that again. So it's one of those things that I've learned all those things. I'm more aware now than I had ever been, because that's what you need to do, is recognize those things in our lives, that those triggers, right? Life is going to keep lifing, and that's what I'll keep saying, but it's how we manage it. And that's why 2 years after my suicide attempt, when I went through that horrible year, 3 major deaths, managing people, life and death situations, yeah, I got frustrated at times, but then I always knew how to use my resources. I always knew how to rebound myself to make sure I stay on my path, because that's the most important part, is using my resources once I was able to recognize them.
And just in you speaking and kind of explaining certain things, it's clear that you do have a faith or a belief of some sort. In what ways, when you were going through all of this, did that ever falter, or was it just something that wasn't at the forefront of your mind back then at those times? How did your relationship with your faith, how did that all kind of come about, or change or maneuver within this whole process?
Well, I was angry at God. I wasn't going to talk to God for a while, right? In fact, in the Jewish faith, at September, that's when I attempted suicide. We have the high holidays, right? People will make fun of it. It's Rosh Hashanah, but they'll call it Rosh Hashanah, right? The point of that, the reason why I'm mentioning that, that's the week that starts 10 days, the holiest days in the Jewish faith, when God is writing your name in the book of life for the next year. And I was like, nope, I'm taking the pen out of your hands. That's that's what I felt. I was like, I'm doing this, man. I'm comfortable with my decision, and I'm taking the pen out of your hands, and I'm going to go with what I thought was a foolproof plan. And I guess I was that fool, and went through it. And again, I heard that voice from a grandpa Mike saying, hey, it's not your time. You got to go back and tell stories. You got to go back and make some changes. And I did. And even then, I still wasn't strong in my faith, but finding the healing that I needed to. And then if we pay attention, that's what I'm going to ask everybody to do. Anybody who's listening to this, pay attention to the things in your life. And God won't do anything for us. He's just going to watch no matter what. We make a bad decision, going to watch. Make a good decision, just going to watch. But those little signs, and that's what I was able to pay attention to. I saw people in my life. Les Brown has this great quote that I use all the time. Sometimes God acts anonymously through people. And, you might be that person that God uses, to help somebody else. I know we were talking about charities earlier, and other times somebody else comes into your life. And that's really what my faith is. And there's still times that I'm like, I question and I go, hey, God, could you just help me understand it? And he just sits there and doesn't answer. The lesson will come in. A lot of times we get the test first, the lesson afterwards. And that's one of the things that I've done, is learned how to do that. But my faith, look, I've reconnected with some people who I love talking about religion. I talk about all faiths, not just my own. And, that's what it is. It's my relationship with God. I used to say that to my parents, which wasn't a trauma situation, but, it was one of those things. It's my relationship with God. At the end of the day, it's between you and God, no matter what relationship. Because I know a lot of people who say they're religious, call themselves all these different titles, and are they acting that way? Hey, I'm not going to give myself any title, but other than Dave. And, my relationship with God, I know exactly what I've done. I know where I've had to make mistakes, and I apologize. That's one of those things that I do, and I've done that from all the time. There's times of the year during that 10 days you're supposed to repent, right? So that's why Jewish people don't have confession. It goes back to, if you're sorry, you're going to be sorry with changed behaviors. So I do try to change my behaviors once I recognize what those behaviors are. And there's also another thing that they say: if you from your heart apologize 3 times, especially to somebody that you injured, and they don't want to forgive you, when we talk about forgiveness, that's not on you anymore, that's on them. So it's another way to pass on that. They don't have to forgive you. Nobody has to forgive you for doing anything that they felt you hurt them with intentions. They don't have to do that. And you don't have to, again, forgive somebody. Forgive yourself, because don't carry on to that extra pain. And that's really where I go, because it is a strong part of faith.
Can I ask this question? From your personal life experience, can you tell the audience what helped you get over your suicide thoughts or never attempting suicide again?
Well, to never attempt it again is because of the mental wellness. Is I know to use my resources. I'm much more attentive to when I'm not feeling right, when I see a behavior in myself that is not true to who I am, and I'm like, okay, what has to get resolved? What's going on? Again, could I be short tempered? Yeah, not the way I was before. And will I get frustrated at times? Somebody cuts me off. Could I get frustrated? Sure. Generally, for cutting off, I don't get frustrated anymore. But there's times. I won't say it's never happened. But the real truth of the matter is once you can identify those things, that's the growth. There was another part of the question. I'm sorry. Can you? Oh, how do I? That's how I know I'm not going to do it again, because of the mental wellness. But also, it's not an answer. So since that point of what I did, I knew that wasn't going to be an answer. It was the answer for then, and now since then, I've been a TEDx speaker. I've published books. I've helped thousands of people over the years, and I'm just getting started. I'm an author, so the messages I get out there are for positive, and we have to work through those things. So when you think about suicide, I wasn't using my resources. So now those are one of my non-negotiables. I make sure I go to acupuncture. If I need to go back to therapy, I do, or I talk to people. I know a lot of friends who are therapists. I know a lot of people who I can sit and talk to, find my community and find that trust. That's where I think we all need to do, is build the right community and the right people. Once we do that, then it becomes the power for us to continue to heal ourselves. So that's really how I did. At the beginning, I didn't want to heal myself. And then 2 weeks after my suicide attempt, I got verbally attacked. I was called white trash. I was called mental case. I was called a bunch of different names. And really, that hurt me, made me cry. But also, I've used that as like a hell no moment, in that, no, yeah, maybe I am white trash. Maybe I am a mental patient. Maybe I am those labels. But the real truth of the matter is, those are just words. And I am not any of those things. I am very confident in who I am. I know what I do. I know what value I add to communities when I walk into classrooms and talk to kids about stress reduction, teaching them how to do some things to always reset yourself. Those are the important things. So I know who I am now, and I let people kind of, that self-talk or that negative talk that people give me, I'm like, okay, that's your opinion. That doesn't mean their opinion is wrong. It just means I'm not going to carry those labels and names.
What is really, the nitty gritty of the aftermath of a suicide attempt? Like, is it, a feeling of embarrassment? Are people overly concerned? Are people worried you're gonna do it again? Like, what is that period like? For yourself or for people that care about you after the fact. And how do you kind of get over the, I guess, like stigma of it all with, somebody or anybody knowing about it?
Yeah, well, that was part of the challenge. Is that when I did my TEDx talk, that was the first time I spoke outwardly, like real publicly about my suicide attempt. But yeah, people are going to judge. I mean, people now, even though I'm comfortable with it, people are still going to judge. Oh, that's what he wanted to do. They have opinions. Those are theirs. They're not mine. I know why I did it. I know why I won't do it, and I know how to heal it, and I know how to help people. That's the thing is, when you're in that period of mind, you have that darkness, no matter what you look at. And I now know how to turn the light on, and I know that the light, even though there's some days that I don't feel the light, but I know that there's a light within me. I mean, that's why I talk a lot about the phoenix, and there's a phoenix, the phoenix rise, and a lot of metaphors. But the metaphor that I love when I talk about the phoenix is most people think the phoenix dies. Phoenix doesn't die. It actually turns to ashes, but then there's a spark from God who then lifts us back up. And I question everybody is let's go find that spark. And if you can't find that spark, I didn't know. One of the first questions I heard after my suicide attempt is, do you love yourself? And I was like, I didn't even know that was an option. I know I can love other people. I didn't know that I was supposed to love myself. So now I know I love myself. Not happy with all the decisions I've made, but I love myself, and I'll continue to love myself. And as long as I do that, everything else will work. Because if you can love yourself, you know how to start loving other people in a better way. And that's how I know I won't go back there, and what I've learned from that experience. I had to go through healing. At the beginning, it was rough. I didn't even want to get up. I didn't want to get out of bed. It was embarrassing to tell people. What are they going to think of me? I was stuck in that mindset. And I'm like, all right, because you don't know who's going to hear it. So even my TEDx, if you look at the video, there's a lot of negative comments on that. But I'm going to still tell you that I won on that, not only because I got on stage, but I had 11 families reach out to me. I had 8 people who actually were in the thoughts of suicide and was like, hey, man, can I talk to you? Because I had pushed it out. I was talking about it, and I made it comfortable to talk about my mental wellness, my healing. And that's what I want to do is I want to make this comfortable wherever we are, that whoever's hearing this, and if you're feeling that way, reach out to somebody. If you can't find somebody, reach out to me. I really do. I've taken lots of calls. I've taken lots of communications. Hey, Dave, I just need something. And for those people who reached out to me who are thinking about it, I was able to get most of them into therapy. I'm not a therapist, and I don't play one on TV. And for there was a couple of families whose members had already died. So we do leave, backwash. I mean, that's really what it comes down to is all the traumas that we leave. It doesn't go away when we leave. We push it onto somebody else. That was something that somebody told me, and I was like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. I was like, all right, there's some collateral damage, and I understood that, but I didn't understand the weight of that collateral damage. And that's why I'm glad I'll talk about it. My kids don't want to hear about it, and they don't want to talk about it. That's part of the collateral damage. I have good relationships with my kids, or mostly for late teens, early 20s, though they don't want to talk about stuff like that. And I'm always fully open to talk about it, other than the methods.
I have one more question. You said I heard you say you were short-tempered.
Mm-hmm.
What was one of the worst blowouts that you had being short-tempered and just thinking about it now?
There's probably a handful of times. I mean, look, I was that guy who is, I was a top bowler in New York State. I came in 5th in the state at one point. But I was also like, if I made a mistake, I would punch a wall. And some of those walls that's how I learned from my dad. And some of those walls were cement walls. So I know a lot of the people who are like, man, that guy's a dumbass. And I was a dumbass. I mean, there's times like that. There were times that, I yelled at girlfriend, in the after my first. I mean, even my first girlfriend, she was like, man, it is so great being around you, but when you get upset, it's not. I mean, one of the best friend who passed away, he was like, man, when you're good, you're really, really good, and when you're not, I just know to back off. So there's lots of times that I don't think about it. That man, I wish I could have those moments back. And yes, it made me and things like that, but it also brought me to a situation where I really wish, and if you know you're going through it right now, stop it. There's a great saying that one of my mentors uses that when's the best time to plant a tree that's 20 years ago? So that way the tree is fully grown today. But if not, the next best time is today. So anybody who's hearing this is feeling any of these things, really reach out, but also stop those patterns. Stop the negativity. I don't want to hear in 20 years that, I remember that guy with the teal shirt, but I should have done it then. Let's try to do it and keep talking about it, because that's what it is. It's really doing it now. And, there's a million of them. Stories and, I remember one time I had was about to leave. So I know you're looking for a story. So I was looking to, there's a girlfriend who is getting sick. I for a while I was having a lot of bad luck in that way. She had got pregnant by somebody, and I tried to tell the guy who got her pregnant that he should be taking care of the kid. Like, it's not my responsibility. And so I saw him in the street, and we had some words, and it led to one thing to another, and it almost led me to be arrested. Police came over, walked it off, and people kind of, we got away from it. But I got to tell you, was not a situation that I'd want to be. And it really is one of those things. All those little things definitely could derail you, and you sometimes get then caught into a downward spiral. Try not to get into downward spirals. Try to figure out ways to level off, and then find somebody who's going to pick yourself up and lift yourself out.
Which relationships in your life were kind of most affected by everything that you had going on, and throughout your healing journey, or now that you're in the better part of the healing journey, have those relationships changed? Have you been able to fix anything you may have broken with people in the past, or are you just kind of like, fresh life, fresh people, leave all of that in the past? Like, where are you, in a family or social type sense?
Yeah, I mean, so there are some people who decided to cut me off, and I respect that. I generally don't cut anybody off. Again, it goes to that forgiveness. Is everybody doesn't know how to work through things, and then once you learn that, I always give everybody a second chance. I mean, Jesus says, give them 7 chances, and if they don't do it, if they don't change in 7 chances, give them 70 chances. So I'm really one of those people who really do forgive. I might not give them the same access to me that I had given them previously. That's, again, boundaries that I've learned, and how to maintain my boundaries and explain to people why I've set those boundaries. So I think that's a really powerful part. But, there's people, look, there's people I know for, 30, 40 years, and, we've had words. And I don't think you could be in any relationship and not have words if you're really being honest with each other, and be like, man, that wasn't the cool way to say it. I mean, I still have these don't get angry anymore as angry, but people are like, Dave, that wasn't nice what you said. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And when they explain it, I go, oh, okay, that wasn't that's not how I said it. Those words, you're hearing it differently. And that's what a lot of times the challenge is really the communication, is how people are saying it, but also how we're receiving it. And that's the lesson I've learned. Is I've had conversations with lots of people. I mean, there's a person who I'm helping write a book. I'm ghostwriting a book, who once asked me, why don't you think I've ever finished my book? I told them, don't ask me a question that I won't give you an honest answer to. And I told him he then went off and sulked and he got upset. And then he came back a couple of months later. He's like, Dave, can we talk? Yeah. And we had that talk. And now he's like, now I see your point. You can't always give somebody advice when they're not ready to hear it. You have to be ready and open to hear some of those things. And if you're not ready to hear, like you asked me earlier about my divorce, it's easy to say, it's her fault, it's this one's fault, and they're going to tell a different story that it's my fault or this and that, and that's okay. But the real learning lesson for me is I can always give grace, because at the end of the day, when I close my eyes and I meet the man upstairs, I want him to give me grace also. I don't want him to remember all the bad things I did. And I hope, there's a lot more wins than losses. There's a lot more things that I've learned that and by the time I do close my eyes, hopefully I've learned a lot of the lessons or all the lessons. I don't know that we'll all learn all the lessons, but learning a lot of the lessons that we need to move through the challenges that we've experienced and kind of learned really where the power is. And the power is within ourselves.
Love it. We are almost at time. Woo, this hours went by fast. Great conversation. As I do with all the guests, can you give advice from your personal life experience that helped you on your journey to healing?
For sure. Face the things that you need to face. Don't be scared of looking like a fool. Don't be scared of those things, because there's learning in that. So again, my suicide attempt, I looked at it. Why did I do it? How did I do it? All those things. And now I'm much more comfortable. Don't let them hold on to it. Don't let people give you names or labels. Be authentic today is really what I talk about. I have a podcast called Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. And a bat is not about violence at all. It's about being awesome today, be authentic, bringing authentic thoughts. That's what I want everybody to do. And I think once you could be your most authentic self and not hurting anybody, that's a win, and that's your sweet spot.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much again for joining us this evening for this conversation. As we do with all of our guests, we like to give you a chance to participate in shameless plug. If you see all of the information scrolling here down at the bottom, if you can let our viewers know if your story or journey has resonated with them in any way, how they may be able to reach out. If you have anything that you advocate for, anything for sale of your own, any businesses that you have on your own, anything that you would like to put on the forefront and advertise, you have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Really, I would just say reach out to David Chametzky. There aren't too many of them. And what I love doing is helping people write their books, get their stories. Or, if you already have a book, I'll challenge you, because a lot of people have these compilation books. I think you need to have your own book. There's so much power, and there's stories about that I can tell you about, is why you need your own book if you're going to be a speaker, if you're going to be owning your own business. It's your brand, and that's what I do, is I help align people. So I do that. And if you're going through some challenges and you need some stress reduction ideas, I'm more than willing to do that as well. That's how I started my coaching, and now I've just turned it into helping people align their message. So I'd love to hear that, and check out my podcast, Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. It's very similar to this podcast, in terms of we bring on guests that and both of you guys are going to come on and just really have those conversations on how we heal ourselves and how we rise out of our ashes.
Of course, I'm on mute. We want to thank each and every one of you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. We want to thank David for sharing his testimony. Hopefully, it will resonate with someone else and help them start their journey to healing. Because a lot of us, even me, If I exploded with temper. I had an attitude problem. I want to thank you that, and a lot of people will not admit to that or take accountability for that. So we want to thank you for that as well, David, taking accountability for your choices, your decisions, and your mistakes, and recognizing it to help others. And seeing we're gonna keep sharing life experiences, ain't we?
That's right.
That's right. So tune in each and every Monday at 8 p.m. on Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube, Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, TikTok, Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, because it's unfiltered and you can speak how you want to speak your testimony. You have the floor. And if you would like to be a guest, please reach out to Demetria, DEMETRIA, at unfilteredunspoken.com. And we will see you soon. Peace.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you.